Recently, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what it really means to be spiritually awake or to have a spiritual awakening and have these thoughts that there has to be something greater here, something more to just being in this human form and living life as a human. And I've been spending a lot of time recently really contemplating that thought and thinking about my experiences, what my purpose is, and why am I here, right? And as we awaken out of this slumber, this unconscious slumber, we start to contemplate our very existence. And me, having just being so grateful to have been able to really step out of the rat race of life and really be able to slow it down and find myself in an abundance of space with an abundance of time to really chart my own destiny. I've taken that opportunity and really dove in and started to contemplate the very nature of existence. So in this video, I want to share with you some of the things that I've been experiencing and thinking about recently when it comes to just that. What is your purpose here? What is my purpose here? What are we trying to accomplish? The ego, the spiritual side, how do these things reconcile with each other? And how do we, in fact, live life as a human after one has experienced a spiritual awakening? Now, if you remember, if you've been subscribed to my channel for a while, you know I've told the story about how I had contact with my guides and how I had a spontaneous event where I popped out of my body and I had all of this energy moving through me and essentially dropped in, an aspect of my higher self dropped in to my awareness. And I've been working since then to really go through and do the shadow work, some dark night of the souls, and really lean into the traumas, the density, the heaviness, the energy that's been anchoring me to a 3D reality. You know, it's that energy that really makes you think that you are only human and that you are separate from everything else, right? That's living through the five senses, being matter and not energy. But in fact, we are energetic beings experiencing a reality that is manifested as matter, so we can move through this dense field and have this experience of interacting with other energies, which we deem as physical, and really having this experience of being separate and cut off from the truth of who we are. And as we start to lighten the load by feeling into all of those fears and the fear of separation and the fear of not being safe and all of these anxiousness thoughts, these anxieties and all of these things that kept us in fight or flight mode, we start to put that baggage down. We start to be able to invite new alternate ways of reality to start to move through us energetically and start to manifest. We start to realize that when we truly open our eyes or open our third eye, we could start to see the unseen, things that weren't there before. So you start to think about, okay, well, if I was in a career where I was getting, day in, day out, the rat race, really focused on external things, and now I'm kind of pulled away from that, and I find myself with all this space, all of this time, you start to think about what are we truly doing here? Because, I realized that most of life up until I had my awakening has been about keeping busy and keeping focused into a 3D reality, right? Which further separates you from the quantum aspect, from the energetic side, the truth of who you are, this multi-dimensional being. And until you really choose to step out of, maybe sometimes you don't choose, maybe you're thrust out of a position or a job or something like that, right? And you find yourself in this spaciousness, not quite knowing what the next move is. You really don't, can't escape from that 3D lock, right? Being locked into that to really start to question, what is this reality and why are we here? So for me, I had the ability to do that, to take that step back and start to question, what is this truly all about, right? I had these amazing experiences where reality opened up in a greater way, energetic way, starting to experience multidimensional energy. And again, begs the question, why are we here? Because now when I look back to operating from that old 3D perspective, none of that resonates. It's completely different. And when you start to loosen your grip on those old programmed thoughts and old patterns about being like a certain level of monetary success and staying busy, maybe achieving new levels of education through school and through college, those types of things, when you can finally start to separate from that and realize that we are so much beyond those 3D experiences, it's like, well, what do we do next? Okay, well, there's going back to the old way, using the old models and trying to create success or be seen or start a business. All these types of old, outdated models are out there, yet we're still living in a reality where some of that is necessary to some extent, right? So that we can pay our bills and things like that. So there's been a lot of contemplating from my perspective as to what my purpose essentially is. Now, I'm talking about, I know my purpose is to help you navigate your awakening. Okay, that's my purpose in this moment. But I'm talking about a greater purpose from the perspective of source. I'm not talking about the individual purpose, because I can help you discover your individual purpose, what you're supposed to do next in terms of your journey, by holding space and allowing you to really start to feel these higher dimensional energies. That's what we do in A New You. That's what I do on my private coaching sessions, right? We get into starting to discover that on an individual basis. What is your purpose here in this physical body? How can you contribute to humanity? I'm talking about, why would Source choose to come down here and manifest as me in this dense experience? Okay, so that's the type of question I've been contemplating for a while now. And I have found a lot of the space and a lot of the time that I have available to, quite frankly, be very uncomfortable, because it's so far removed or different from the old programming and the old model of getting your education and getting a job and getting a career and working and getting a mortgage and all the things that society, getting married, all the things that society says you have to do, and then going into raising kids and taking them to sports and all that stuff, right? All those things that really keep you focused into the 3D and keep you distracted. Okay. But once you start to divorce yourself from that and find yourself in this space of abundance of time and really the ability to dive in and do some deep contemplating and deep thinking as to, like, what is this all about, right? And for me, I've started to have some really interesting information come forward regarding this whole existence, okay? And I'm talking outside of, again, my purpose here as a human, as a multidimensional human, to really assist others start to find their purpose as a multidimensional human. But again, I asked the question, like, why would Source come into this realm, manifest a body? What's that all about, right? And you really need to separate yourself from the old 3D programming, the old 3D patterning, and the model of a third dimensional separate reality to be able to find that space, to be able to start to really think about these things. Because what I've noticed is my mind will always go back to that 3D model when it tries to come up with a reference point for some of this very expansive energy that we've been receiving. Okay, but what I've discovered so far is that the thing that we are here to do, okay, is to simply expand. We are to let go of those old models, those old paradigms, the old programming and patterning. Release yourself from that and get into a space of allowing for unseen to come through. And here's the interesting thing. We don't know what the unseen is. It's really an unknown, right? We don't remember what these higher dimensional fields look like. So a big part of this experience is to from the perspective of the human being, open up to aspects of ourself that couldn't be perceived in a third dimensional field. Okay, so we have thrown ourselves into the bottom of the ocean, and we are now trying to rise back up, okay, to the surface. So it's very much like what that's about, right? So how do you do that? Well, it's continuing to do the healing work. What we want to do to rise up, think about it if you're in the bottom of the ocean and you're weighed down by 3D emotions and 3D energies, you're not going to want to start reaching and trying to swim with all that weight attached, right? You're going to get exhausted very, very quickly. Okay, that's counterintuitive. What we want to do is really start to put a lot of that weight down. And when you put that weight down and shed that weight, that dense energy, the traumas, the limiting beliefs, the limitations, self-imposed stuff that you've agreed since you were born was an identity. It identified with you, but it no longer does. And once you agree that it no longer does, you can start to reprogram that. And you essentially put down that dense energy, those weights. And when you start putting those weights down, naturally you start to float up, right? Your vibration increases. You start to resonate to higher frequency realities, okay? And we do that by allowing an expansiveness. And by allowing this expansiveness, we are directed into the weights that are holding us down. So we go through that process. Now, while we're going through that process, we're thinking, okay, should I leave my job? Should I leave my partner? Is there something else I should be doing? What should I be? Should I start a new business? These are all things that are 3D related. They're all things that really are the weights that hold you down. And I know you may be thinking, well, Mark, that stuff's necessary as we still live in a 3D reality. And that's okay. You can still lean into some of those things and entertain those things. You could start a business. I have a coaching business and a new you, an amazing program, right? These types of things are available to others who want to start this journey and really need the guidance and need the support. And I am more than grateful and happy to offer those services. That is my purpose here as a human being. Okay, but the overarching, there's something overarching that is a purpose that is beyond being human, and that is allowing for the expansion of consciousness. Now, it's beyond being human because in a way you have to step aside from your human condition, from your human identity, to be able to allow this expansion of consciousness. Okay, so when we're thinking of the purpose of Source coming in here into this reality to do what? Really to expand is to start to shed the weight that makes you human and start to allow the light in that is a return of your multidimensionalness. Okay, so from a true purpose perspective, we are here to experience an expansion in consciousness. Okay, that's it. So from a soul perspective, what I've been experiencing, what I've been thinking about, just doing this deep thinking, meditating on this recently, is what is the overarching thing that I should be reaching for, right? And that is just an expansion of consciousness. So the more I accept everything else that's happening in my life, I don't resist it, I accept it, I could then find a little bit of peace inside and start to allow an expansion to occur because I am putting down the weight that is anchoring me to a lower dimensional field. Okay? So I have my purpose here as a human to bring all of this information forward and to help others work through their traumas, through their limiting beliefs, reprogram the subconscious mind, start to manifest higher timelines, right? To ascend. But there's this overarching purpose that we are here to just experience the expansion itself. And that means allowing yourself to detach from the human condition and lean into the unknown and allowing higher states of being to come into your experience, to come into existence through you without knowing what that looks like. That means being available to start to perceive energy, to start to perceive your guides, your star guides, multidimensional effects, pliability with time, pliability with space, all of these amazing things which are starting to happen on a much larger scale are really part of the experience of why we're here. Okay, now your mind is going to want to pull it back down into 3D and try to make sense of that. But that is counterintuitive. You don't want to lock it into a model of 3D that keeps you anchored to the sea floor. We want to let all of that go and know that we've lived life up until now as that third dimensional human, but it's time to really shed that skin for a lighter version of who you are. That is the expansion of consciousness. That is rising up to a higher frequency level of existence. That is your purpose. Now, you could do your earth purpose, human purpose, along the way, but I think you're going to find as you continue to expand that a lot of the old ideas and paradigms surrounding what should I be doing as a human are no longer going to resonate. They're going to start to fall away. So we will discover new ways of serving humanity as we rise in consciousness. But we have to remember that that is just a product of the overall expansion. We focus on the expansion by doing that inner work, doing that inner healing work, and we just unveil amazing new insights about ourselves, amazing new insights about the universe, about source, all of these amazing things. We continue to rise and we modify our journey along the way. And as new ideas come in and old ideas no longer resonate, we course correct. But the main thing is we stick to that purpose of leaning into expansion. Okay, we don't define expansion. We lean into the new and we allow it to come forward. Anytime we try to define it, we squeeze it into an old 3D box and limit ourselves. Okay, so you could have purpose, you could start a business, you could find a new relationship, you could do all of these things along the way. All of these things we could consider a purpose. It's purpose from the human perspective, but the overarching purpose from the soul perspective, from what I've experienced recently as I've sat and contemplated this, is trying to figure out which direction should I go in, right? I bring it back to the higher perspective of expansion. That is the thing. Everything else will come out of there.